Welcome to Nicole's Wonderful World. Today we're going to be making cottage cheese with 3 simple ingredients. We've got our gallon of milk, our distilled white vinegar, we'll be needing 3/4 of a cup, and salt, as always, to taste. Welcome to Nicole's Wonderful World of Pets, where today we are making a little bit of cottage cheese. I've never done this before and I thought I'd let you travel along with me and see how it works out. So I had a bunch of milk that we weren't going to be able to consume it all, and I figured, hey, let's make cottage cheese. So we've poured our milk into this big pan, this pot, and I'm stirring it. With milk, you really have to stir it constantly to keep it from scalding, so be sure to stir it. And I'm trying to bring it up to a temperature of approximately 130, scratch that, a temperature of 190 degrees. So I've got my thermometer here, which I had kind of like nestled as so, but the problem with that was, well, what do you think, boys and girls? The whole thermometer is reaching that temperature along with the pot. So it became very hard to handle, literally, because it was 150 degrees. So here we are. I'm just using a meat thermometer that I had handy. Oops. See, it's not foolproof by any means, but we do what we do. Just trying to do the best we can. Okay, so actually I'll leave this spoon like that to hold it in place, and I'll just get another spoon to stir with. While we're waiting for this to come up to temperature, right now it's almost to 160. I just want to make note that I like to have my kids be in the habit of using a Sharpie to write the date that we open milk on, because you really don't want to keep it more than a week, or it'll go bad. So as I'm stirring, I can feel the bottom where it's starting to stick a little bit. So we'll just keep stirring, and then what we're going to do is add in 3/4 of a cup of white vinegar to this. And I was just pausing a minute because my recipe called for using a gallon of milk and 3/4 of a cup of vinegar. But since I only had half a gallon, this was a partially used up gallon, I also have to cut the vinegar in half. So if you wanted to use an 1/8 cup, I don't know if you have 1/8 cups, but it would be 6/8. 3/4 is the same as 6/8, but I think it'll be easier if I just put in a 1/4 cup, and then I'll use my 1/4 cup and only put in half of that amount. So that's my plan. All right, let's see how the temperature's doing. Excuse me. Almost to 180, so we're getting close. So I'm gonna pause so that I'll be able to use my splicing skills, so I can take 2 videos and try to splice them together before I add it onto YouTube. So I'll be also working on my technology. All right, so here we are, just about 190 degrees. I'm just making sure I continue to stir because this milk will scald and burn, so I've got to keep it moving. And yep, looks like we're there. So let me turn off my flame and keep stirring it. Now don't forget, if I were to grab that thermometer, I would have to drop it pretty quickly because it is also 190 degrees. So safety first, kids, safety first. I'm gonna use my oven mitt to grab it. And we'll just set that aside. And what we're gonna do now is add in the vinegar. So this is just regular white vinegar. Got it from Target probably. And this is a 1/2 cup measure. And remember, I said I needed to use the amount of 3/4 cup, but since I was only doing half the recipe, we'll also have to have the vinegar, and that's about right. You know, I'm gonna go a little bit over. It doesn't have to be perfect, just pretty Okay, so we're gonna see what happens. I'm gonna pour in the vinegar and stir. And it is looking, ooh, wow. Okay, that's actually pretty, it's really gross looking. I mean, well, we knew this would happen, right? I mean, it's gonna curdle. So there are the curds, and all of the whey is that yellowish looking liquid there. So, woo, that's a kind of a fun project if you need to use up your milk and you like cottage cheese. So this is our cottage cheese right there. This is so neat. So what we're supposed to do here is just give it a couple of stirs, but I've been enjoying stirring it, and we're gonna let it cool. It's really hard to work with the liquid when it's this hot. So we're gonna let this cool, and in about half an hour, I'm gonna come back and we are going to strain our cottage cheese. You can salt it and taste it. All right, so it's been about half an hour that this has been resting and cooling down, more importantly. So next step is to take it over to the sink right here where I've got a colander, and I didn't have cheesecloth, but I have this very loosely woven clean cotton gauze type of a piece of fabric that I'm going to use, and we will just bring this on over. So now that I've got it on my sink, some people said that it's good to save all that whey and you could put it in smoothies, but well, maybe I'll save a little bit of it, but I definitely do not need all of that. So I'm just looking for what kind of a slotted spoon I have to get out my cheese. Now, notice we're doing this over the sink, and I'm not walking across, dripping. That's why everything is close together. So we'll just get all this delicious homemade cottage cheese out of there. And I'm gonna salt this in a little while. And oh, one thing I should mention, normally when I'm using this particular stove, or pot, because it's enamelware, using metal like this is not a good idea, because it's one of those La Creuset pots, and I love it. It's great for so many things, but it has one weakness, just like Superman. It's not kryptonite though, it is steel. So this can scratch the enamel, so I shouldn't be doing it, but I'm just gonna be very, very careful and just skim. But it doesn't take much to mess up the enamel on there, so. All right, I've got just about all of it out. And a few more little pieces there. And then the recipe directions I was reading said to let it sit for like another half an hour to cool further before you try to mess with it, but we'll just see how hot it is. I like to think I have hot hands that can probably handle it, but we shall see. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so I'm just gonna leave that over there and try to squeeze this out. So I don't have a camera person. I am pretty much just doing it on my own, which, you know what would be great? A tripod. But, so here we are. Oh yes, and look at all the juice coming out of there. So, directions said, let it just kind of sit and drain for about half an hour. I just figured I'd try to help that along a little bit. But just holding it there, you can see it is draining quite well. So we'll let it sit and kind of drain on its own. But I'm gonna keep it covered like that because, you know, I want it to cool down, but I also don't want any anything landing on it or dust. So I'm just so curious. Look at that. Look at that little bit there. I just tasted it. It's quite good. A little rubbery, and definitely could use a bit of salt, but it's very good. So here's my cottage cheese. It's been sitting. The whey's been, oh, don't worry about that. The whey's been coming out of it. Ooh, it hasn't been a full half hour. I sometimes don't like to wait the full amount of time, but clearly I should, because look, still getting some more out of it. So give another little squeeze or two. I mean, if there's some way that you don't squeeze out, that'll be fine too, I'm sure, but this is the first time I've ever made this, so I kind of want to use two hands and give it a good squeeze. All right, I'll show you my technique. I was twisting this around and around, and then really able to squeeze any last little bit out of it. So that's kind of what I would recommend, is tweezing this, squeezing it tighter and tighter and twisting it, and then you can really get every last little bit out. So I got my salt that I brought over here. Let's take a look at our cottage cheese. Look at that delicious cottage cheese. So we'll put this in here, and we can put on some salt. I like cottage cheese with like chives in it or some green onion, but sometimes people like it more of a sweet type of cottage cheese, and they might use pineapple or jam on it. But even if I decide to go sweet, I'm gonna want some salt in there to help with the flavor. So we'll just kind of move this around like this so it all gets salted. And cottage cheese. So, oh, and some people put a little cream in this too, if they like a creamier consistency, as opposed to like, well, obviously this is very, very dry, but yum. It's so fun to do things on your own. So, hey, give it a try. If you've got extra milk on hand and a little bit of spare time, this is a great project. Stay tuned, and hope you like and subscribe to Nicole's Wonderful World. Here you go. That's the finished product. And salt makes a difference.